Well, we moved to Scarsdale in 1971.
Uh-huh.
I just called my mom before we got on so that I have that date correct. Um, and so I was in fourth grade,
Uh-huh.
and I went to Edgewood. And on my first day, I we had moved from the Bronx to
Right.
Scarsdale, so I felt like I was in another universe. I lived in an apartment in the Bronx, and it was, an urban area, so you always heard cars going by and things. When we moved to Scarsdale, I remember the first night. It was so quiet. And my sister and I were like, wow, like it's just so quiet. Like there was no noise. There was
Hmm.
no cars going by or anything like that. So that was really unusual. And of course, we had a hard time sleeping because we were used
Ah,
to the noise. And so it was kind of, a bit unnerving. Um, so the first day of Edgewood, I go into class and the teacher introduces me as the new girl, and a sea of white faces, and the teacher said, "Would anyone like to show Cheryl around?" And this little girl raised her hand. She said, "I would like to show her around." And it was another little girl who was Puerto Rican
huh.
and was the only Puerto Rican
All right, all right.
in the class. So she showed me around the school, and we became best friends. And in hindsight, I have thought to myself, yeah, of course we became best friends because we were both other
Hmm.
in that environment.
Right.
And I'm still friends with her today. In fact, she's like one of the only friends from Scarsdale that I'm still friends with.
What's her name?
The first person that I ever met in Scarsdale.
Wow, that's kind of amazing.
Yeah, her name is Dorothy Fry Emery.
And had she come also from an urban place before or no?
Her story was she was adopted,
Okay.
and her and her brother were adopted by a man who worked for the Rockefeller Foundation.
Wow.
So that's how she came to Scarsdale.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So
Um,
she shows you around.
Yeah, she shows me around, and the school is, I was used to PS 78 in the Bronx, which was, a brick building and 4 stories, chain linked fence around. There was no grass on the schoolyard; it was like concrete.
Yeah.
Um, so I get to the school, and there's like a field, and there's swings, and I was like, I'm in heaven. This is wonderful, and I had really good teachers. I remember my teachers, Mrs. Hurwitz, who actually we had a little reunion recently,
Oh,
and she came. And
wow.
I was able to, tell her how much I loved her as a teacher and everything. And I couldn't believe she was still, above ground,
Right.
so to speak. And yeah, it was a really nice reunion. Yeah, so I was, really good in sports. I had a growth spurt, I think, before everybody. So
Mm,
I was taller than the boys. I was taller than all the girls mostly. And so, when we were playing bombardment, I don't know if you remember that,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
where you like throw the ball at each other and you hit each
Yeah.
other and you get called, like I would be like the first picked, and so I was really like strong because I was, tall
Right.
for that age. Um, But there was one incident that happened that, a racial incident that, unfortunately, with these incidences, you wish you could forget them,
Yeah.
but of course you never do. I think I was at a gym. I no, I if it was gym or the lunchroom or something, and this kid called me the N-word. And I remember this like
God.
this like hot feeling came over me. I'm like 10 years old. It had never happened to me before. And I, of course, didn't say anything back because I was just like shocked. So I went home that day and I told my mom what happened. And the next day I went to school, and my mom was a librarian at a school in the Bronx. And so she got up every day and went to work, and my dad went to work. So unbeknownst to me, I'm in my class like the next day, and the loudspeaker says, "Cheryl, Holliday, please come to the principal's office." And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what did I do? I was like, thinking, what did I do wrong? So I get to the principal's office, and my mother is standing in the principal's office with her hands on her hips, and I'm like surprised to see her because she didn't tell me like, I'm coming to your school today, or she didn't tell me anything. So I come in the office, she's already there, she's standing up with her hands on her hips, and then the little boy comes in who called me the N-word. And so my mother looks at the principal, and then looks at the little boy, and then looks at the principal again, and the principal says, you need to apologize to Cheryl for what you said to her. And so the kid apologized to me in front of my mother and the principal. And then I was told I could go back to class.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so embarrassed when that incident happened because I was 10 years old.
Right.
And, I'm in the principal's office, and now the principal knows what happened. And I was just embarrassed. But of course, years later, my mother is, she is tough.
Yeah.
And I thought it was amazing what she did, because she didn't even let hardly 24 hours go by before she wanted, the apology in front of her. Like she didn't want the apology, call the school and whatever, or letter. She wanted like the verbal apology in front of her and the principal and, and me and the kid. Yeah.
She's going to take a day off of work to
Yes.
make sure it's acceptable.
Yes. 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 Yes.
It's interesting, she's like a blocker for you in football, like she's like, you've got the ball, but she's got to perform that role, because no kid, or very few kids, are going to stand up for themselves. If you're victimized in any way as a kid, you don't want anybody to know about it,
Right.
even if long-term it rectifies it. But she's got another parenting role to do,
Yeah.
another support. Huh.
Yeah, and she did not shy away from it at all. And in fact, when we moved to Scarsdale, my mother, works in the public school system as a librarian at PS 21. And so she had a firsthand experience of what city schools are like. And I think that was what led her to say, I don't want this for my kids,
Right.
moving forward. And so she had looked into private school options, like for my brother. And then I think once her and my dad did the math, They were like, why live in the Bronx, send the kids to private school? We need to go to Scarsdale because that they have the best public schools, and it'll be less money
Right.
than sending all three of us to private schools.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so anyway, when we get to Scarsdale, my mother, works in the school system. And so she invited the teachers over to our house for lunch.
Huh.
And because she wanted to know our teachers. So it wasn't just my teacher, it was my brother and my little sister. She invited the teachers to come to our house for lunch because she wanted to meet them. And so they came, and then they started talking crap about my mom and said, who does she think she is? What does she want? She's showing off her house. They saw it as an act of arrogance instead of as, wanting to connect, because that's what my mother, that's what she had always done, was like, let's get to know the teachers. I just
Right.
don't,
That's so
and
sad to be
yeah,
misinterpreted like that.
yeah. And she said that she got ridiculed for it really badly. And she wasn't, doing it to show off anything. And in fact, right, in Edgewood has smaller houses than, Fox Meadow and
Yeah.
Toad and stuff. And yeah, so
And
so that was,
how did she know they were talking about her?
she said that somebody told her, like I don't know if it was another teacher or maybe I heard something. I can't quite remember,
Yeah.
but she said that she knew that someone was talking about her. Yeah,
Ugh, that stinks.
yeah. So I had a paper route as,
Oh.
I delivered these, I think, the Scarsdale Inquirer.
Huh.
And I was one of the first paper girls, because there was usually, paper boys.
Right.
So me and my friend, who lived around the corner, Becky Brown, whose father worked for Mobil Oil, we decided to have the paper route together. And we split it up and we would deliver the papers. So oftentimes I would deliver a paper, and the person would come out and they'd say, oh, why don't you come in and have like a cookie or something? And I'd say, oh, okay, I think I have time like for a cookie. And then I'd come in and there might be other people in the house and they would usher me in to like the living room and say, this is our paper girl. And I would be like with my cookie, like, hello, how are you? And I just thought that was, I don't know, it was a little bit weird. And then I had one paper route client. He had the creepy house that the kids, were afraid to like, go near it or whatever, but I had to deliver a paper there. So I delivered a paper one time and he opens the door and invites me to come in. And me being like a kid, I'm like, I didn't want to be rude. And I was like, okay, and he turned out to be really nice. Fortunately, of course, I'm horrified by my own behavior.
Yeah.
Because like I could have been chopped up into little pieces. But yeah, so sometimes I would be on my paper route and the people would open the door and say, oh, would you like a cookie or whatever? And then we start talking and then they would say, I just love your hair. Can I touch it?
Oh my God.
And so then I would like bow my head down and let them touch my hair. let them pat it. And it happened more than once. It happened multiple times. And at that point, I knew I was the ambassador for my race.
Right.
But yeah, that kind of solidified, okay, I guess I'm going to have my afro touched because of their curiosity, because they don't know anybody. And so maybe they're going to think it's steel wool, and they would always say after they touched my hair, it's so soft, surprised, as if it could be steel wool or something. And another thing that would really bother me is after vacation time. A lot of the kids would go on these really nice vacations, especially in the winter, go to these islands, and they'd get tan, and they'd come back, and then they'd want to run up to me and put their arm next to my arm to see how dark they were, if they were darker than me. And that happened all the time. After every holiday that, like the winter holiday, especially. So I have such an aversion to that now, that I am a professor, and one of my colleagues came up to me just a couple years ago, and she had gone on some vacation, and she was tan, and she comes up to me and puts her arm next to mine, and I pulled my arm back, and I said, please don't do that. I said, what are you trying to say? I'm tan? I'm not tan. And you're tan. And I think that's great that you're tan, and you're happy that you're tanned. But what do I have to do with that? And she was like, Cheryl, you need to calm down. I said, I know. This is past trauma. I even, admitted it. But yeah, and those are all microaggressions. Just, there wasn't that word back then, but.
No. What is that?
I don't know.
Why?
I don't know. I think it's and then some of them would get very dark, much darker than my skin tone. They'd say, oh, Cheryl, I'm darker than you, as if okay, and what's your point?
It's as if your darkness is at the top of your agenda all the time, your agenda.
Right.
And it's much more on top of mind for them. Right. Comparing.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's a thing. I belonged to, in junior high, Scarsdale Junior High is the 3 different houses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now it's 4, but same thing.
Yeah. And what's the 4th house?
There's Popham, Fountain, Butler, and
Fountain.
Cooper. Yeah, Fountain.
Cooper. Mm-hmm. That's the new one. I was in Popham.
Okay.
House, and in junior high, that was when little boys started looking at little girls, and there was a little boy that I liked, and he was not brown, but I just never pursued it, and I did not date in junior high at all. And I began to be friends with, I guess you would call them losers, mm-hmm. or geeks, or just
the fringe.
Excuse me?
Kids in the fringes.
Yeah, kids that weren't in the popular,
Right.
crowd, because the popular crowd was like the real, pretty girls, and the boyfriends were the football players and the soccer players and things like that. So I ended up hanging out with these guys who were at the fringe, and I think they hung out with me because they weren't attracted to a black woman, I mean a black girl,
Mhm.
and and so they didn't see me with that same sort of tension that they would, like, if they could date me or something.
Right.
At least this is my own, like, thought process,
Mhm.
about it. And so I became friends with, there were a couple guys who, years later found out that they were gay, but they had not come out yet. And so we all had our little group, and we were like the rejects. We were like the island of misfit toys, you know. Um, and I love those friendships, because I really felt like I could talk to them, and like they understood what it was like to be on the outside. Uh, and even though it was different,
Right.
for them. And yeah, and we used to hang out and have so much fun. And yeah, and I was friends with mostly guys, because the girls were all into, like, not eating,
Uh,
and who is going to um ask them out, and there was all of, that.
did it change when you hit the A school, or was it no?
Yeah, the A school, again, was kind of like, it wasn't for losers, but it was, the regular high school considered the A school, oh, the freaks go there. So there were the freaks, the jocks, and the nerds. And I was part of the freaks. Yes. Yes. And so I really wanted to get into the A school. And the A school was only 2 years. You could only go for your junior and senior year.
Okay.
And they only let in a certain number of students. So they had a lottery. And if your name got picked, you were able to go if you wanted to go. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you got lucky.
Yes, I got picked, and my best friend Dorothy got picked.
Oh,
Yes. So off we went to the A school, and that was amazing. Does the A school still exist?
it does. Hmm.
Okay.
I don't know a ton about it. I don't. It might be more years now, but I'm not an expert. My son is. He was in choice in middle school before I
Oh,
went.
nice. Yes, I remember Choice.
So that was his little like home base of different thinkers. But he didn't want to do the A school for some reason. Not social.
Yeah, well, the ACE, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not for,
Right.
everybody. It was based on Dr. Kohlberg's theory of moral development.
Hmm.
And so everybody had an equal vote. So the teachers and the students would vote on which classes to offer,
Wow.
how long the classes would be, and basically everything. We would have these community meetings, and everybody had an equal vote and a say. And of course, the classes were, eight students.
Wow.
That was the largest class, was like maybe 10 students was the largest. And we had classes outside and underneath a tree, and we had classes at people's houses, mansions, and we had classes within that house
Right.
that the A school is housed in. And, I was one of the only Black students there. Yeah, but I loved it, because you could not do your homework, because there was only 8 of you, and you were going to be called on, and so you had to, participate and be prepared. And it really helped me to do that. And then half of the school year, or I don't know if it's half, but maybe it was like a third. It was 3 months. The school closes and you do an internship.
Mm. And where did you do yours?
I wanted to be a social worker, and so I got an internship at a halfway house in the city, tutoring inmates in their GED.
How was that?
I thought that I was going to save the world,
Yeah.
and I was going to, help them with their GEDs, and that they were going to bake me cookies and say thank you. And they told me that I better watch my back in the bathroom because something could happen to me in there. Um, and I was like, I cried every day. I got home, and even the director, who was this lovely, strong Black woman, I think she just looked at me and she's like, "Isn't it nice that you from Scarsdale are coming down here to like help us?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm here. And yes, I want to help." And, and they ate me alive. Nothing happened to me in the bathroom. Like nobody jumped me, but there was always the threat of like violence. Yeah.
And I mean, it's also, if you've been in and out of the system, you know how to work people, you know how to put pressure, and you're pretty green coming out of Scarsdale.
Yeah, I mean, I just, my father has done prison ministry,
Uh-huh.
and I kudos for him, but I have not been able. I mean, so far I haven't
Yeah.
done that. But yeah, so I crossed social work off my list
Okay.
after that internship. But of course, it was very valuable because it showed me that that my skin is not thick enough for that. And I have great respect for anybody whose skin is thick enough
Yeah.
to do that profession.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so you said there were very few other Black students in the A school or in Scarsdale. Did you find that you had any special affinity or connection with them, or did you just stick to your group of outcasts and misfits?
Yeah, I pretty much, yeah, stuck because my brother was all into sports and he was with the like jocks and everything and the brainiac people. And I was like the opposite. I was like with the, we were like,
Yeah.
and right. And so, I was very different from my brother experience, well, in some respects. I did do sports. I ran track when I was at the high school, not at the A school. And I enjoyed that, quite a bit. But again, I was the only minority a girl on the running team. I heard one of your other interviewees talk about Jack and Jill.
Yep.
And Jack and Jill was created because Black people could not join the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts.
Oh,
And so when parents wanted, to have their kids in the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts, Black people were not allowed. And so that's when Jack and Jill got created, so that, just like your other interviewee said, so that all these kids, who lived in Chappaqua and, all of these, white communities could actually see some brown kids who were going through the same experience
right.
of being the only one in their, community. But there was another group called Hansel and Gretel.
Hmm.
And Hansel and Gretel was what the Graves belonged to. And the Graves belonged to Hansel and Gretel because that was for the upper class,
Oh,
upper class Black families. Jack and Jill is for like middle class Black families. So it was very much like a classist thing, because other um, black middle class black families wanted their kids, to marry and meet other little middle class family kids, and so we would have like dances and go on trips and go, skiing and we would go to the city, go to Studio 54.
Oh,
Not when it was like big,
right.
after,
Yeah.
way after. And yeah, and that's where I met my prom date, was at one of these Jack and Jill events, but he wasn't from Jack and Jill. He was like from the neighborhood in like the city, or he happened to be at the club that that Jack and Jill party was at. And so I meet him and we dance and we exchange numbers, and we started dating. And he came out to Scarsdale from he lived in the Bronx in like an apartment, but it's one of those really big apartment buildings.
Hmm.
And he came out to Scarsdale to visit me, and he was like, "Where am I?" And I was like, "Oh, this is Scarsdale. This is where I live." And he had never ever seen like a black family, I guess, that owned a house, and yeah, he was just blown away. And I was like, why? I didn't quite get it, but then I was like, oh, because he only knows people who live in apartments. And so, of course, all right. And then I went to visit him where he lived, and I was just like in shock. I couldn't, I had no experience like that. The metal doors and the way that the elevator was, really, and smelly, and
It was like
yeah,
public housing.
yeah, I think it might have been, yeah.
Sounds like it. Big building.
Yeah, yeah.
Huh.
And he was such a nice guy, just really, really sweet. Yeah, yeah. And so that's who I went to the prom with. Um,
When you went to the Jack and Jill events, how did it feel? Did it feel like I can relax and be me? Did it feel like I'm with my people? Like did it feel better than regular life or worse or just whatever?
well, at first, it was, I understood the meaning behind, Jack and Jill and going, but it felt like forced, it was like, oh, we're all brown kids. All
Right.
right, let's pair up. Okay,
Yeah.
Ben, Ben and Cheryl, you could be like a couple. And I'm like, I don't really like Ben, and I don't really have anything in common with him except my skin color.
Right.
And so, I don't know any kid who went to Jack and Jill who ended up marrying another kid from Jack and Jill.
Huh.
So the grand plan, if that was the plan, I don't think it worked out too good.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like, I guess, unexpectedly, a parent-led organization for teenagers is not going to get a lot of traction. You want to make your own decisions. You want to be, meeting somebody have of your own initiative.
Yeah, yeah.
But maybe in a previous generation, maybe it got more, it had more success. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. It was yeah, my brother got to be friends with some of the guys in Jack and Jill, but I didn't really, date anybody from Jack and Jill. But it really like when the Cosby Show happened,
Hmm.
and everybody was like, wow, and like a lot of black people were like, I've never seen families like the Huxtables,
Right.
before. And my thought was like, those are the only families I see.
Yeah.
And in fact, I know families that live in larger houses than the Huxtables and have much more money than the Huxtables who are Black.
Right.
And so it wasn't like some big revelation. I was like, well, finally they're showing like my life
Yeah.
type of type of thing. You
Hmm.
know, two professional, parents, and so forth.
Hmm. So when
Um,
it came time to look at colleges, what did you wind up looking at?
and I went to SUNY New Paltz.
Yeah.
I went to a state school,
Right.
and I majored in art.
And had you started in art in the A school or in high school?
Yes, and after my foray into social work,
Mhm.
I abandoned that, and yeah, I started taking classes at SUNY Purchase.
Right.
I think on the weekend or at night, I started taking drawing classes there, and I ended up loving it. And so I wanted that. That's when I said I'm going to major in art, but my parents' friends were horrified that I was going to major in art, because you should be majoring in law, medicine, or business. Art was like a big no-no, and I am so grateful to this day that my parents did not listen to
Huh.
their friends, and allowed me to pick my major. And because nobody in my family had, I come from a family of like mostly engineers.
Right.
So nobody had put together a portfolio. Nobody knew how to do that. I didn't know anybody. And so, I tell the story to my students now because I teach graphic design. I say, well, I took my drawing pad, I put it on my bed up against my wall, and my dad took a picture of it. He didn't crop out the pillows, he didn't crop out the bedspread, and that's how, like I said, and I'm sure the admissions counselors had a really good laugh because they probably were like, "What the heck is this?" And I didn't know any better. So subsequently, I applied to other art schools, but I didn't get in. And so I ended up going to SUNY New Paltz because they did not require a portfolio in order to be an art major.
Hmm. And
And
paradoxically, do you think that it's possible that the lesson, the lower expectations on you for being a girl gave you more freedom to choose something that you were more passionate about? In other words, you think Maynard would have had that choice?
um, yeah, Maynard chose to go into engineering.
Right.
It happened to be the family business.
Right.
I mean, the extended family, because my father is a Baptist minister
Right.
and my mother is a librarian. But we have uncles and great uncles, who are all engineers. Yeah. And he chose that. He just happened to choose what my parents were like, yes,
Right. Right.
bravo.
Right. But
Yeah.
you didn't get major pushback because, I guess both. Well,
Right, because I was a girl, and my parents fortunately did not listen to their friends, and they, of course, had the worry because I'm majoring in art, and their friends are like, "Is she going to live on the street?
right.
How is she going to eat?" The whole starving artist thing, and everything has worked out,
Right.
fine, but yeah, yeah.
To me, it really says a lot because your parents, by coming to Scarsdale, prioritized education and your future over their own possible experience, right? Over, there were certain things that they knew it was going to be more expensive, et cetera. So to not accept, not require you to max out your possibilities or whatever, I think it's it really says a lot, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it was yeah, and I always fought my parents about, gender equity. I was like, you know, my brother had to empty out the garbage and rake the leaves on the patio, and I was like, I would like that chore, and he can, clear the table and be in the kitchen. And my mother was like, no.
Uh,
Maynard is not, going to do that. That is your, position.
and how
So,
about your younger sister? Was she too much younger to be of help, or she had her own thing?
she, also had to clear the table. Yeah, we were like, yeah, yeah.
Domestic, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I do have a fond memory of hanging out with a friend of mine, and we would go pool hopping.
Oh,
And so when we would like ride our bicycles out of Edgewood. I think we would go to what is the town that I mean, what is the area that borders Edgewood? Fox Meadow?
maybe Heathcote.
Heathcote? Yeah, maybe Heathcote. Anyway, we would go to where like the mansions are.
Okay.
And it was usually in the summer. And a lot of Scarsdale people would like go to Europe for like 2 months, or
Right.
go to Japan or whatever. And we would swim in their pools. And we would, me and my friend Becky, we would like, sneak in the backyard, and we'd swim in these gorgeous pool, and then we'd go to the next pool, and then to the next pool, and we would just pool hop. That was
No,
like a thing.
no fear of somebody coming out and yelling at you or whatever. No.
No, no, and I was with, the friend I was with was, white, um, and no, we didn't think anything of it. I don't think anybody had cameras
Right.
back then, so yeah, we didn't think anything of it.
That's
And I will also tell you, in junior high, I would have play dates with some girls, and they would say, let's go stealing. And
uh,
I said, let's go stealing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, and they'd use me as the decoy
oh,
because
oh
yes,
God.
yes. So
So all eyes on you.
yes, because I'm, being followed in the store, and they're like, you know, I'll get 5 necklaces, and of course you'll have one. You just keep the sales lady busy. And I was like, okay, that sounds like, because I didn't actually have to like take it,
Right.
but yeah,
And that's
and
downtown Scarsdale or White Plains or
yeah, downtown Scarsdale. Trap Rock Suite was like this real hippie store that a lot of us would go to. Yeah. And the girls that would steal were very wealthy.
right.
So it wasn't like it was an adrenaline
Yeah, the thrill
real.
and sport of it.
Yes, yes. And that went on. I mean, for I would say, I think a good couple of years. And it was in junior high, I do remember. And until one of our friends got caught.
Uh,
And we had stole from like 5 stores in this like strip mall, and she got caught on the fifth store.
ooh.
And so then they looked in her bag and pulled out all the stuff from all the other stores, and her parents got called, and I saw that, and I was like, like, no more.
But she never ratted anyone else out or said they were with me or anything. She took
No,
them all.
no, 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 she didn't. No, she didn't.
That's a close call.
Didn't. Yeah, yeah. But I always thought that was, I don't know. I don't know if that's like just like a wealthy kid thing, or maybe all kids go through like a stealing phase. I don't know.
I don't know. Winona Ryder got busted, right? It's got to be 20 years ago or something like that. But I remember when that happened.
right, right.
So I guess, yeah, it's a little jolt of, I mean, maybe it is if you're a heavy conformist, and again, with the not eating and the looking a certain way and the dressing a certain way, and this is one antisocial way that you can feel like you're actually exercising some autonomy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do. Maybe I hope I'm not jumping around
No,
too
no, no. That's the way these things go.
um, during Black History Month in February. We would get phone calls like move out, N word, and yeah, a lot of those. And my sister and I would run to the phone so that we would get the call before our parents did, because we didn't want our parents to have to listen to it. And yeah, and it would happen every February.
And I've never heard of such a thing. Who do you think was calling, or do you have any idea?
No, no, I have no idea. I have no idea.
That's interesting. So if you wanted to spare your parents
Yeah.
that shock or
Well, I'm
whatever.
sure it wouldn't have been shocking to them,
Right.
but they were, working hard and yeah, and I just yeah, kind of wanted to like protect them from it or something. I'm sure they could have handled whatever, but
Right.
um, you know, I just yeah, that was just something, and my sister and I used to joke about it. We're like, "Oh, it's February. Time to sit by the phone."
Wow. And how was Black History Month in school for you?
Um, I don't remember like much, it was like the usual Martin Luther King, whatever. I mean, my father marched with Martin Luther King, and my father, had rocks thrown at him. My father was at the March on Washington. These like historical figures, like my father knew them. My father knew Malcolm X. My father collected money for Malcolm X's widow when he was assassinated to give her money because she had 5 children. And one of her daughters went to SUNY New Paltz with me.
Huh.
Yasa Shabazz. Yeah, Yasa Shabazz. And yeah, and we had, there was a Christmas card we got from Coretta Scott King, and, yeah, and correspondence from Mrs. Shabazz, which was Malcolm X's, widow. Yeah, we have that, history. I had the greatest honor of my life a few years ago to meet John Lewis.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I got a picture with him, and oh my gosh, incredible! Just incredible. He came to my college to speak,
Wow.
and I was able to speak with him. It was just amazing, really, really amazing.
I read that I don't know if you have an angle on it as an art professor, but the graphic novel that was written with him,
Yes,
the 3 series, I thought it was amazing.
yes, he actually autographed it for me.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Oh, yes, and the artist was with him who drew the graphic novel. So I met him, and he signed the book too. So yeah, yeah, great, so great. March.
That nonviolence in the face of violence is a theme that runs through that. They show them sitting at lunch counters, and people are going to either punch you or put ketchup and mustard on you or whatever, and you've got to be the sort of person who's able. They showed them training each other,
Yeah,
training, yelling slurs each other's face, trying to get a rise out of them to say this is because this is what's going to happen to you, and you need to be able to keep your cool. It's amazing.
yeah, and I that's what I tell people. I say my father's not 200 years old. My father's only he's 89.
All right.
And so this is not like history long, long ago.
Right.
Yeah,
And at the time you were studying it, in school, he was in his 50s or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Huh.
So, when we were talking about Martin Luther King, of course, I knew that my father knew him and marched with him and, all of it. So, I think I must have like, said, yeah, my dad marched with Martin Luther King.
And
But,
they
it,
probably thought that was not noteworthy, and that
no,
all black people probably knew Martin Luther King.
right, right. Um, when there was an assembly, and I think George Parnell, one of you, I talked about how like these famous people would come to the Scarsdale High School assemblies.
Hmm.
So one assembly I go to, and Count Basie's band, and
Wow.
Count Basie is the assembly. So I'm like, I know who he is. My father has played his, music. I know, and I go in and I go, oh, and my other classmates, they were like, why are you, gasping? I said, don't you know who that is? They were like, no, who is it? I said, Count Basie. They're like, who? Count, no recognition
Yeah.
of who he was. So after the assembly, I waited, and I went up to the stage and I got his autograph.
I'll bet he
Um,
was really pleased that you were there.
oh my gosh, I was just like, I couldn't believe I was in the same airspace as him. But yeah, it was amazing.
Mm.
It was really, really amazing, really amazing.
Huh.
But yeah, I think that my time in Scarsdale was very, very interesting. But I did not want that for my children. And I did ask my mother before I got on Zoom with you. I said, when we moved in, did any of the neighbors come over and like welcome you to the neighborhood? And she said no.
Mm.
But Scarsdale had the welcome wagon person come
Uh-huh.
over. The welcome wagon was a person that would show up with like coupons and stuff for all of the different businesses
Okay.
in the Scarsdale Village, and they would tell you about trash schedule and all of that. Yeah.
I don't think they have that anymore. Not that I have. I don't remember getting that.
I'm sure it's digital now.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Right.
sure it's like a thing on the yeah.
Huh. But you wound up being friendly with your neighbors?
Yes, yes. My mother did say that the neighbor that lived directly across the street from us, it took them a long time to even like, say like
Mm.
hello. But as the years rolled on, and my brother was good friends with one of our neighbors' sons. And when his sister got married, um, when she got engaged, her mom came over to my mom and said, oh, she got engaged. And my mother's like, great. Um, and she said, and you're not invited to the wedding. And my mother was like, okay, like, and my mother thought that was so odd, because my brother and his and their son were like really good friends.
Yeah.
And we had lived there for, a number of years by the time, they had gotten, she got engaged.
And the woman obviously knew that your mom would maybe not expect it, but that it would be a natural thing to do, thereby making the effort to go over and tell her that it wasn't happening.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
People are weird.
Yeah, yeah. And we did have neighbors right behind us. They were Dutch, and the sons were Uno and Remco. That was their names. And my brother was friends with them, and they were very, welcoming. But again, they were other,
Right.
just kind of like us. Um, and we played on the block without, too much, incidents. But I did ask my mother. I said, were any of the women working in Scarsdale when you arrived?
Hmm.
And uh, um, and my mother said no, they were all homemakers.
Right.
And she was commuting to the Bronx to do, PS 21 and the library.
And at that time, was Edgewood still going home for lunch? Or did you eat at Edgewood?
No, thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah.
No, I went home for lunch. Yes, I walked home.
And then you just made it yourself?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Did,
And yeah, yeah.
did you ever have like friends come over for lunch, or you went to theirs, or that just wasn't what you did then?
Well, I would have to sneak to have my friend over. And so, yeah, I'm sure I snuck my friend over.
Yeah.
I also belong to the youth group at Scarsdale Congregational Church,
Oh,
which was really, really good for me, especially in high school when I was like, you know, uh, having a lot of angst. And they used to have plays. And so one of the plays that they did was To Kill a Mockingbird.
oh,
And, guess what part I played?
yeah.
I was Tom Robinson's wife.
Mhm.
And the only other Black guy, he was Tom. And then another play, it was um, Dark of the Moon, or Dark Side of the Moon was the play, and it had a light witch and a dark witch.
Uh,
And I guess I wasn't dark enough for the dark witch. So yeah, I had blackface.
yeah, you're gonna get canceled.
Uh, it was for a part in a play about these supernatural powers. So I wasn't supposed to look
Right.
human. I was supposed to look like, and I must say, the girl who played the White Witch, she was blonde, but she also wore white face.
Right.
You
It's
know,
like
yeah.
chess pieces. It's not supposed to represent,
No, no.
shades of humans. So your family went to the Baptist church, but you wound up at the youth group? Yes.
Yes, we went to the Baptist church, but the Congregational Church had a stronger youth group and a larger youth group, and we went on retreats, and talked about all our teenage, stuff, and yeah, it was really, really great. It was such a good experience that when my kids became teenagers, I went in search of
Mm.
a youth group for them, because it really, really helped me. It was a place to go and have counsel or get counsel from the youth pastor and stuff, instead of going to your parents about everything. And so it was a really good, socializing, and also having just another parental kind of figure that wasn't your parents, who you could like confide more stuff to.
And I'm assuming the kids who wound up in that were going to be a higher proportion of outsiders, fringe
Yes,
kids.
yes,
You
and
know,
which I was used to being around.
but
Yeah,
now you're in the mainstream of that group.
right.
I went when I was growing up in Hastings. I was in a youth group at the Dutch Reformed Church there, which was, we didn't go there. But it was completely pivotal to my life. My best friends are from there, and even the kids who were older than me or younger than me, but we would all hang out together. And like
Yeah,
those are the kids who,
yeah,
and those are the kids who you were more vulnerable with, who you talked about other things with, and it
right.
wasn't this social, whatever. Even though it had its own dynamic, I think if you played guitar and sang, you were a little higher. If you were,
Yes.
you know, if you were the type who gave other people back rubs, you were probably a little bit higher in the thing. But it was a much more opening group than the free for all that high school was.
Yes, yeah, I would totally agree with
Yeah.
what you just said. Yeah, and so yeah, and my children had very good experiences with their youth groups. So yeah, go youth groups.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and the Congregational Church was more open, like it wasn't as rigid as the Baptist, church was. I actually got married at the Baptist church in Scarsdale.
Oh, did your dad officiate? No, nice.
He walked me down the aisle and then went on up to the front. Yeah, and just went around and got the Bible, and yeah, it was a little weird.
Yeah, I know. It's almost like he should drive you in the limo to the honeymoon too. He's like, Dad, we're good. We got it.
Yeah, and my father, I thought I might get disowned for marrying outside of my race. My parents had never said that to me. They
Uh-huh.
they never verbalized, but it was like an unspoken truth. And I, said I was marrying, Chris McBride, and I remember I announced it at the dinner table, and my dad looked at me and he said, "We'll talk about this after dinner."
And
And
and had how did they know him? Had he been over?
yes, he had been over just like twice. My parents were not big on our friends coming over,
You
yeah.
met him? Was he something you? Where did you meet him?
I met him at a bar in Tarrytown,
At what age?
while I was in college. So I was like 20.
Okay. Then a
20,
couple years
21.
later, you tell them we're getting married.
Actually, it was pretty quick court, dating. He asked me to marry him 6 months after we met.
Okay.
So it was pretty quick. And yeah, and so my dad said, we will discuss this after dinner. And I was ready to be disowned. I was like, okay, here it comes. And but that was not the case. And we ended up having our marriage counseling sessions with my dad.
And so, what brought him around, or was he not that far away to begin with?
Um, I guess I thought that he was going to disown me, but he kind of surprised me. And then he agreed to marry us, but we had to do the pre-Canaan marriage, counseling before he would marry us. And so I saw that as an opportunity because I was like, oh, he'll get to know Chris, and he'll love him, and right, and everything will be good. And so he did get to know him, and he said, okay. Yeah, and he ended up marrying us. My parents did leave the wedding reception a little bit early, but not early enough before like the whole dancing and everything, of all of that. But
Your dad had a long day.
yeah, 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 yeah,
And now
yeah.
they get on. They get on.
Oh, oh yeah. I often say that, if we were to ever get divorced,
They
like,
pick his side.
yes, of course, of course, they would take his side. Yeah, yeah. 36 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're married. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, so we got married at the Baptist church and had our reception on my new in-laws' front lawn in Irvington, New York, which is right on the Hudson.
Yep.
And they had this beautiful pond and, 2 acre and a half of property. And yeah, so yeah, yeah.
Did you feel accepted by them?
Yes, they did say to my husband when he said, do are you, I'm marrying Cheryl. They said, are you trying to make a point or a statement? And he said, no, no, no. I love her and I want to marry her. And fortunately for both of us, we were not each other's first interracial dating person. Like I had dated, white guys before, and he had dated black women before. So it wasn't like this was like, new to our dating, I guess, habits or, yeah. No, and Mrs. Hurwitz, she was great. I mean, her and her husband, I'll never forget this. They took us down to the beach and they got in wetsuits
Wow.
with a net and scuba gear. And they go in the water and they come back out with this net, this huge net that had all of the sea creatures in it. And we all got buckets, and she made this natural environment fish tank that we were going to watch, what happens in the fish tank and who eats who and who's eating this plant. And she like talked us through the whole like ecosystem that was in our, area.
Wow.
And yeah, and when we got together with her, just like a couple years ago, I told her that had such an impact on me. And she was like, I did that? Well, you don't remember the wetsuit and the scuba gear?
What was that, like at Rye Playland or something? Where's the beach?
Yeah, it must have been Rye. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Her and her husband in wetsuits. Yeah. And we got the crab and the shells and and all the different seaweed. And we watched everything, eat each other.
Wow.
It was the
Amazing.
coolest thing. It was really, really cool.
That's
Yeah.
great. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
All
thank you
right.
so much, Cheryl.
Oh, such a pleasure.
Yeah, this
Thank you
was
so much for doing this.
my pleasure. So I'll be in touch, though.
All right.
All
Such a
right.
pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank you so
Jordan.
much, Cheryl. This was
All
great.
right. Bye-bye.